What's your view on like vulnerability for men?
It's weakness.
It's a weakness?
Yep, 100%. I don't see trauma the way that most people see it. I just see it's an event and then something's happened in the body that energetically gets constrained. Thoughts are superliminal, so they're faster than the speed of light. Feelings are much slower than that, so they're denser from a frequency perspective. So thoughts inform feelings, which dictate behaviours, which produce results, create experiences, and experiences repeat and form patterns.
How important do you think, forgiveness?
I don't even think necessarily it's forgiveness, because once you really understand forgiveness, you realize there's nothing to forgive. Most people are they're running around unconscious in invisible cages that they don't know they're in, and these psychological conflicts dictate that. If they're in the world of I don't matter, they can't influence the world of matter because they've got their hands cuffed behind their back with the program I don't matter. Someone asked me this about purpose. They're like, how do I find my purpose? I'm like, you don't, you let it come forward. It's like love, authenticity, joy, happiness. That's not something someone gives you. And I always say that whatever's going on within you, life will draw it out of you like poison from a wound unless you deal with it.
What impact do you think like self-sabotage has on individuals, on relationships?
It's a good question. So
for people who don't know you, how would you describe what you do?
I was having this conversation last night with someone, and it's been 6, almost 7 years since I started doing this work, and I still have difficulty explaining exactly what I do. And I'm quite comfortable with that. But I've gotten it down to like a simple statement is I end painful subconscious psychological conflicts for people, which rule the day for people. Most people are they're running around unconscious in invisible cages that they don't know they're in, and these psychological conflicts dictate that. And so what I do with that is I find, because it's subconscious, it's not conscious. And so what I do is I find the root cause and then I dissolve that for them.
What's the story or the series of events that have happened, historically that I guess have shaped where you are and who you are today?
Yeah, it's the process that I use in work. So I reverse engineer everything to try to go back to the genesis of, your history, which is always childhood. So you're going to develop these unconscious templates. They're like blueprints in your psyche. And I grew up super abusive household, which was really ruled by my mother, highly narcissistic, very cruel, very aggressive, not physically, but emotionally and psychologically, because she knew physically wouldn't really land. But my dad was he became more and more passive around that as he went on, which is something that I work with now around creating stronger men that don't bow down to this kind of stuff, because men are the protectors, and he didn't do a good job of that over time. And so the household that I grew up in was a template for chaos and abuse. A lot of instability, a lot of aggression, all that sort of stuff. And so what happened is I started to develop those traits internally. So, I was aggressive, street fights, I wouldn't say I was chaotic, but I was violent with other men a lot of the time. And so what I started to see was, why am I doing this? Where did this come from? Because I got tired of it. I was partying, taking drugs, womanizing, all the things that our society largely celebrates for us as men. It's like, if you can achieve things, your achievements are going to be based on how much money do you have, how successful you are, how many women can you sleep with, or that's kind of the undercurrent of it. So I was like, why am I doing this? This isn't satisfying. I don't want to do this. But there's some sort of driver to it that I couldn't stop. And even though it wasn't making me happy, I wasn't healthy, I wasn't a contributing member of society, I was completely self-centered, but I couldn't figure out why. And then I went back to my childhood and I realized I was modeling and mirroring. So there's modeling and mirroring. Modeling is something that you're taught and then you mirror it later on. And so I kept mirroring what I was modeling. And so I had to realize I had to model something new in order to break and shatter the mirror of my childhood to go through that. And so when I'm working with someone, I reverse engineer them back into childhood. And most people realize they just become their mother and their father in the environment that they grew up in.
And do you help bring awareness to them that that's the case, or have they got any form of awareness around that could be a problem?
Most people, when they find me, they've tried. I'm sort of like the end of the road. When people have tried everything, they come to me because they haven't been able to actually really nail what is going on for them. Most people might have a bit of an idea, but I've also seen people that had absolutely no idea at the same time that they were exactly like their mother or their father. It's why you hear People say, oh, you're exactly like your father or you're exactly like your mother. But it doesn't land any further than the conscious mind. You just go, yeah, whatever. I don't want to listen to that. But what happens is when you bring true awareness, so there's insight versus ideas. Genuine insight, you'll have a release in the body. That's in the world of not knowing. I didn't know that that was there, but then I know it. Ideas are more like, yeah, I know it, but I don't really listen to it. It's more of like the beliefs. So what I want to get people to is genuine insights, because what happens with that, you could say a genuine insight is almost like enlightenment, but not from the spiritual text of enlightenment. It's to bring light into the mind, which means shining light on the darkness of something that you couldn't see that was unconscious prior to me bringing it to their awareness.
Was there like a specific situation that happened where you're like, hey, this is the line of work that I'm going to now be committed and, ready to serve in?
Yeah, I mean, the specific moment would have been I was in New Zealand, so I moved out of Sydney because, we know what Sydney's like. And I was partying too much and, my nickname there was the Wolf of Wall Street guy because for those that go watch the movie if you haven't watched it, and I was like a minor variation of that. I wasn't as bad as him, but I wasn't far off. And environment's very important, and you will become the environment that you're in. And I realized I had to get out of there. And so I moved to the mountains in New Zealand, and I had a farm over there, and I was there with no one, no friends, just cruising on my own. And I woke up one day and I actually chose 5 things to explore. So I chose motorcycles, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, naturopathy, music, and tattooing. And so I thought I'll use a process of elimination to discover what I'm supposed to do. And then over there, I didn't even have Wi-Fi. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing anything. It was my whole system slowed down, which turned out to be quite a painful process to deal with what was going on inside. And I just woke up one day and I wrote all the books down that I was reading, and the topics were like consciousness, reality, trauma, mystical experiences, shamanism, psychedelics, breath work. Wrote that list out, and then I wrote a list of what comes to me naturally, which is speaking and language and communication and selling. What do people come to me for, which was advice on business or relationships at the time. And what do I love doing? And one of them was like closing deals, speaking to people in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I looked at this and I went, I'm meant to be a therapist. And it was just in that I knew.
What was next step? So you wanted to become a therapist?
Yep. What was next? So I came back to Sydney. So I stayed over there and just let it sit for a bit and started reading more books on therapy and the therapeutic process. Came back to Sydney, started studying a Bachelor of Integrative Psychotherapy. And in that time, I knew that I wanted to work in the field of sexual trauma. And I actually went to one of my university professors or teachers, whatever you call them, lecturers, and I said, where's the course to help people heal from sexual trauma? And they kind of scoffed at me and they said, well, good luck, because it can't be healed and nobody teaches it. And me, in my typical defiant nature, I was like, challenge accepted. And then I ended up leaving university in that degree and started to look at and research different papers around sexual trauma. And then my third client came in and she was a woman with sexual trauma. And then it was just a couple of thousand women that I worked with specifically after that.
And why sexual trauma? Like, why did that come alive?
It's interesting because most of the time it's your pain becomes something that you work through, but that never happened to me. And so it was just something that came to me in a dream, because the girl that I was with at the time it had happened to. When I saw the pattern with that was my first understanding of what it was like to step through a pattern. So when you link up a pattern, it's like you step through a psychological doorway and life becomes different after that. It's almost like a veil gets lifted and life's never the same. And so I saw this pattern of how she behaved, the language that she would use, different elements of her behavior. And then when I looked at it, it was like I saw every woman that I'd ever dated this had happened to. It had happened to my mother, to my sister. I saw every woman in my life it had happened to. It was phenomenal. And it was like everything went panoramic. At the cinemas where they open up the curtains, it was kind of like that's what happened. But I wasn't fully aware of what was going on at the time. And so from that perspective, I realized maybe it was karma, maybe it was a spiritual path. I don't really know, and I don't really need to know. But that was what life delivered to me in order to help women with after that.
Have you ever had a conversation with your sister or your mother about?
Yeah, they both admitted it. So did my dad. It happened to my dad too. So maybe, you could look at it, it's almost romantic in a way, like you come here to heal your lineage or whatever. I believe that's true on some level. I'm very logical and factual, so I don't really like to deal in the realms of the esoteric with it. But someone comes in to end the chain, and then you deal with the mess that parents, grandparents have created so you can stop it. And I believe that's part of the role that I took on.
How would you define like sexual trauma?
In what sense?
Like, is someone is suffering from sexual trauma? Is it quite broad, or is
Usually what I've seen, so I worked with a couple of thousand women with it, and I have to be careful in the way that I say it. So I don't see trauma the way that most people see it. I just see it's an event, and then something's happened in the body that energetically gets constrained. But what happens is most people in the modern sphere look at it very somatically, like you got to deal with it in the body. I look at it from the mental perspective of it, because what I've seen is when an event happens, a program gets switched on. When the program gets switched on, that informs our perception. So when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So the program that I found, that I discovered through this work, was I'm powerless. So I'm powerless gets switched on during an act of violation or from an authority. Most of the time what I saw, and this doesn't make it okay, is that when a child is abused, it's usually done in a relatively sort of gentle, loving way. And this, again, I really want to preface this, that it's not, I don't condone this, and it's not okay under any circumstances. This is why grooming happens, because it's done from a manipulative aspect and it's a boundary violation. And so when an authority figure comes in and abuses the child then, because they're too young from their rational mind to understand what's going on, unconsciously develops an aspect with authority that they're powerless to someone taking what they want. So what happens is when I open up that, each program has a set of thoughts that goes with it. The thoughts inform feelings. Thoughts are superliminal, so they're faster than the speed of light. Feelings are much slower than that, so they're denser from a frequency perspective. So thoughts inform feelings, which dictate behaviors, which produce results, create experiences, and experiences repeat and form patterns. So when the program gets switched on, it slips unconscious, and then that produces a set of thoughts, which produce the feeling, which then go on to the behaviors, etc., like I mentioned. So that person's going to be walking around in this behavioral adaptation from I'm powerless to subservience and dominance. Most women that have been abused in this perspective, which is really unfortunate, will bring in either a boss, a boyfriend, a partner, or relationships where they're dominated and controlled through an authority that they give their power away to. And that will continue until the program resolves itself.
You said the word program a few times, and I've heard, programming, like how do you say that?
So the programming I see and that work with is based in a form of negative language. So I'm not something, or I can't something, or I don't something. It's negative against the actual true self. So most people think subconscious programming is like behavioural, like a behavioural adaptation, or like I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not tall enough, or I'm not pretty enough, I'm not qualified enough. That might all spring from I'm not enough. Whereas I'm powerless might be more along the lines of like, I don't want to be seen in this perspective. Like, oh, this person, I'm scared of this person. This person has control over me. I can't speak up. They're my boss. I was just going through this with someone I know last night. She was wanting to just call in sick, and she was going to lie. And I said, don't lie. Just tell the truth. She's like, I'm worried what my boss will think. I said, see, you're more scared of telling the truth because of what someone will say to you, as opposed to standing true in what you think is right by telling the truth and just going, I don't want to come in tomorrow. I've got too much stuff going on. But that powerlessness construct was playing out. So the boss is a perceived authority, and then that's going to be playing on the subservience, so dominance and subservience, and she's going to feel powerless. The only way to move through that is to realize the only thing she can give her power away to is the idea that she doesn't have power in that moment. And so the programming, it's not even necessarily a sentence. It's a construct that lives within our psyche that controls whole aspects of our reality. And there's multiple ones.
And so it's negative?
It's always negative. It's never positive. It's like and we had this chat the other day, like people write affirmations. The opposite of affirming is negating, right? So if I'm writing, I'm a millionaire 500 times a day, I'm only confirming that I'm not a millionaire, because if I'm a millionaire, I don't need to write that. It's there, or if I'm enough, I don't need to write that because I'm just going to confirm that I'm not enough, because if I believed it, I wouldn't have to write it. So these are the reactive spaces of the ego. The ego moves in an active state or a passive state. So it's a move towards or move away. The move away aspect is negated to keep you away from discovering your true self. And this is all in the subconscious realm, which is all about defenses. So the subconscious is the ego, which is purely defensive, which defends the true self, which is trying to emerge through the subconscious. And language constructs our reality. That's why it's programming.
So how often would you, like what percentage of people would be aware that they are thinking negative, number one, and that there's like they might not have the understanding that it's a program, but like what percentage of people are actually aware that they've got these negative thoughts happening constantly?
I say there's different levels of awareness, right? So I'd say the people that are truly aware of the root of it, very small. Very small. Most people believe their thoughts, and so they chase them and they try to untangle their thoughts or get rid of their thoughts or stop thinking. The mind is meant to think. That's what it's there for. So true awareness, it's like there's unawareness of awareness. So someone's not aware. Then there's awareness of the awareness. And there's awareness of unawareness. Like awareness of awareness is some people will sit there. Most people are up the top. That's completely unconscious. Then there's awareness of unawareness underneath it. But then there's unawareness of unawareness. That's stillness at the bottom. Most people don't live at the bottom. That's where you're walking around and there's no distortion. I have moments like that from time to time, but not a lot, because we live in a world that's quite stimulating. So the amount of people that are actually aware of their negative thoughts, they're probably aware that they're negative, but not aware of the negated fact that's informing that they're negative, which is the program.
And how are you helping people, let's say, obviously, I'm sure you go through a whole process, but for someone who, you might think's got this programming going on, like, is there a process you take them through to help them, like, see it?
Yeah, so I'll reverse engineer it and I use questions to help them arrive using their own awareness. This is very important because if I'm sitting there, like how many times have you had someone that's going, you're this, you're that, defenses go up, arguments ensue, criticize, defend cycle starts to activate, ego maintains itself and you can't get to it. You have to use questions to get there. So if someone's, let's say, come to me with like thyroid issues as an example, I'm like, okay, so thyroid sits in the throat. The throat is the center for communication. So generally when there's a blockage there, they'll have tonsillitis growing up a lot as a child or glandular fever or Hashimoto's or Graves' disease or whatever it is, thyroid stuff that's going on in the throat. This means that this part of their experience was not able to be expressed as a child. So the opposite of expression is suppression. So I'm going to listen to the way they talk to. Like I've done this thousands and thousands of times now. So I can tell just by someone being on the phone, by the rate that they breathe, how tight their esophagus is, and how shaky their voice is. So that's a bit more advanced. But for people listening, it's like if you're not seen and heard as a child, you're going to develop tonsillitis a lot or throat issues as a kid. So then we start to reverse engineer. It's like, okay, so what was it like as a kid? Do you think you were seen and heard? And most weren't because we came from Boomer and World War II generation, which, to be fair, they're not really up to scratch with emotional intelligence. Our generation's cleaning that mess up. So then I'll go, okay, cool. So you weren't seen and heard as a child. Then I start to go backwards. So if they weren't seen and heard, I'll start to address their negative emotional addiction. So people that weren't seen and heard are going to have a negative emotional addiction to deprivation, to being deprived, because they weren't nurtured or nourished as a child. So what's going to happen is they're going to start to develop a behavioural compensation to deprivation. This is a binge and purge cycle. So they might develop an eating disorder where they eat and throw it up. Right? They might develop a spending disorder where it's like, this was me. I got heaps of money. I'd make 100,000 in a month that I'd spend 110 somehow. It was always like binge and purge, which is wired to be deprived. So when I'm deprived, I start to feel empty. When I feel empty, I feel starved. When I feel starved, I start to develop hunger. Hunger creates drive. Drive creates a craving. Craving is going to want to be satisfied, but because I'm addicted to deprivation, I have to keep emptying myself up to satisfy the deprivation addiction. Now, the deprivation addiction is actually going to be conflated with what I consider love. Underneath that, what's going to be controlling all of this is a program called I Don't Matter. So what I'll get someone to do is say I don't matter back to me. And I've done this in my course a number of times and everyone will pop in the throat. Because if they're in the world of I don't matter, they can't influence the world of matter because they've got their hands cuffed behind their back with the program I don't matter. So if I don't matter, what I'm going to actually do is bring in someone that puts my needs at the bottom of their list and puts their needs at the top of their list. And I'm going to put my needs at the bottom of my list by virtue of this person reflecting that back to me, which is why I attract them in. And then my needs just go to the bottom of the list and their needs go to the top of my list. So when you can't get your needs met in a relationship, this program is going to be the one that controls it, and then you're going to have difficulty speaking up about it. So generally, I'll look at what's going on in the external. So a relationship that's not working, it's usually relationship, health, or money. They're usually the three things, and they're all the same thing.
When we caught up, we were talking about, or you mentioned psychological conflicts.
Yeah.
And you said you got 10 of them.
Yeah.
What are they?
Denial, deprivation, criticism, control, being unloved, being rejected, being abandoned, being humiliated, being betrayed, and being victimized. These are the only conflicts that we're ever up against. It looks like our partner. It looks like our boss. It looks like our financial situation. It looks like the world. It looks like Trump or Biden, whatever. None of that's accurate. That's just the perception. They're all guided by these 10 conflicts. These are the negative emotional addictions we develop in the form of conflict internally.
So let's work through an example of one of those. Like let's just...
Deprivation is one, right? So that was the one where it's like, I don't matter, informs deprivation, emptiness, hunger, starvation, drive, craving, addictions form from that. So criticism's probably an easier one for people at home to understand. Deprivation's a bit more complex because people aren't really familiar with the concept of emptiness or hunger or drive. They might from a word perspective, but from a somatic felt perspective, in the world of deprivation, that's where loneliness develops. Loneliness is just an absence of authenticity because you feel isolated to yourself. But criticism's a bit more like easy to understand. So criticism comes from the program of I've done something wrong. So then judgment starts to kick in. And then when we're judging other or self, we're going to need to bring in someone that criticizes us. Criticism, what does that need? Someone to defend against. Then, so what do I need to make that happen? I need an enemy. And what do I want to do with an enemy? I want to defeat the enemy.
Yeah.
And I want to defeat the enemy so I don't defeat the part of me that feels I need to defeat someone else. And that's how it happens. And then when we do that, the emotional byproduct is guilt. And then guilt, like in a court of law, a judge sits at the top of a court case, passes down a verdict of guilty or not guilty. Yeah. The presumption is I must have done something wrong to be in there in the first place. So then I feel guilty that I've done something wrong or I've hurt someone to be right. It's one of those two things. Then what that inspires at the top end is we go back into our childhood and look to see where we were made to feel like we'd done something wrong by a parent. So guilt can go towards criticism and judgment, or it can go towards forgiveness and innocence. And guilt is the gift that reminds us of our own innocence that we were like as a child to bring into the situation that we weren't aware of.
How important is, do you think, forgiveness?
I don't even think necessarily it's forgiveness, because once you really understand forgiveness, you realize there's nothing to forgive. And this is like, this gets people a bit because they're like, how have, I've been through horrible stuff. It's like, yeah, we've all been through horrible shit. No one really comes into this life and has this super easy run. It just looks different for different people. But if we look at forgiveness, I look at, a previous relationship that I was in, which was really challenging. It really took me to the darkest parts of myself. And I won't go into, saying anything negative about it because she was an immense gift. And at the time, I thought, I'll never get past this. Like this woman's done for me, whatever. But when I saw the gift that she gave me, she helped burn up any of the false self that was left there by virtue of just being her. She was reflecting back all these parts of me that needed to be burnt up through the individuation process. And so when I realized that, I realized there was nothing to forgive. She did nothing wrong. She was actually my greatest gift. And when you start to see the gift in it, which was the innocence that she was coming in, we agreed to this on some level to do it. I chose her. It was my choice to stay in a relationship with someone that was very abusive. She just represented my mother and me splitting from the mother internally and separating that once and for all. So there was nothing to forgive for all the stuff she did wrong, which was cheating, lying, playing me off against her ex-husband, all sorts of nasty shit. I chose to stay in it. So there was nothing to forgive at the end of the day. Actually, it was more about blessing her and honoring her and going, thank you, you freed me. So when you get to that point, you realize there's nothing to forgive because she never did anything wrong.
You said the word individuation.
Yeah.
And you talked about cutting from your mother.
Yeah.
What's your view on all that?
It's the essential part of life. We have to do it. And if we don't do it, so what it means for people listening, it's to split from the internal spaces of your parenting. So it's to become undivided. Individual actually means to become undivided, not this separate unit over there. It's to become undivided internally, so the tension of opposites that are going on between light and dark, good and bad, whatever. What you have to do is go through a process to reveal your authentic self. That's the game. And I've done this thousands of times. I used to think it was like healing or purpose or whatever. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's to dissolve and dismantle anything that's not you, excuse me, so you can become you.
How do you do that?
You go through whatever's false and look at what you've inherited and dissolve the subconscious, which is the programming, because the ego is a collector of programs. So it's not about getting rid of the ego. People, when they say, oh, it's an ego death, I want to kill the ego, that's the ego telling you that. That's why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's about integration. So integrating the two parts and realizing you can have a healthy ego, but coming from the expression of the soul. So the ego, when it's unconscious, will activate in an active and a passive state like the programs. So at the basic level, it's going to be dynamic and active. So it's going to be about fighting, like getting out there, fighting, all the rest of that. When you move up a level, you go into the passive state of the ego, which is more like, I'm going to step back a bit, be a bit more avoidant, withdrawn. Once you move up another level, you move into neutrality. This is where it's like, I don't know who I am. Midlife crisis often happens here. So you'll go, oh, I don't know who I am. I just feel unmotivated. You know, we've had conversations like this before. I feel like I need to do more. I don't really know who I am. So this is where you're dancing between the ego and the entry point to the soul. The first layer of the soul, from what I've seen, is the passive state, where I'm fully committed but attached. Then I move into the dynamic state of the soul, where I'm fully committed but totally unattached. And that's where we want to end up. These are the layers we have to go through of individuation through, you could say, your divine expression. So we clean up all the distortion in our history, and then what happens is we collapse the bridge between the head and the heart, which is the throat, and then there's no distortion in our expression. That's where I'm just comfortable to be me. I don't really care how it shows up. I stop taking things personally. Then I get to do my work in the world through true, authentic expression. And for men, this is why we had rites of passage at 7 to 9 years old in tribes, be taken from the mother and separate from the mother. Now, we've got like a wave of mummies, boys, nice guys that are men in their 40s and 50s that listen to their mother and honor them over their wife. That's not how it's supposed to be. And they'll bring in a woman that they want to mother them, because men want the unconditional love from their mother, from their woman. So when that stops and you actually individuate and separate, those constructs stop showing up. And our societies become inverted as a result of that. So when a man knows who he is, he knows where he's going, he knows what he wants, he's a man of substance and clarity, and he's pretty much unshakable, and he doesn't bow down to expect the woman to be his mother, because she'll only fall in love with 3 things: his strength, security, and confidence. I'm going through this with my partner at the moment, because she's going through a bit, and I'm just unshakable. I don't really have emotion around it, and I just hold space for her. She's used to being with men that are very emotional and very unstable, which most women are, unfortunately, these days. So that represents a capitulation or a rolling over to the feminine, where it's like men have sort of become like boys these days, and that's because of an absence of the individuation process.
There's a few things I want to touch on. One is I read a while ago around, you know, as we grow up as humans, like our authenticity is stripped away.
Yep.
Just by parents, programming from other people that we're hanging around with, and, you know, we start to lose that authentic self. So what you were saying earlier is about like reclaiming that. Like,
I would say not reclaiming, rather that it's more about allowing that to emerge. Someone asked me this about purpose. They're like, how do I find my purpose? I'm like, you don't. You let it come forward. It emerges from you. It's like love, authenticity, joy, happiness. That's not something someone gives you. It's like you don't find happiness or joy or love or purpose. It's an internal state that emerges from you. So it's more around like looking at who we're told we're supposed to be, or actually more importantly, who we're told we're not.
yeah.
Growing up. So don't do this, don't do that, don't touch this. It's all negated language. And so when I'm not something, I'm going to be living in the world to confirm I'm not something. So becoming authentic is about removing the things that I'm not to allow that authenticity to emerge, and then it just becomes a natural state.
The example you're giving just with your partner about you holding space, what's your view on like vulnerability for men?
It's weakness.
It's a weakness?
Yeah, 100%. So, and I cop a lot of flack for this, but I've worked with thousands of people now, and I see relationships break down. I was just on the way here, I was in the car talking to a good mate of mine who a woman just ghosted him and disappeared because he was vulnerable with her. Now,
when you say because he was vulnerable, like,
yeah.
like in what way? Like, what
so
does that
he was
mean?
getting emotional and opening up about his emotions to her, and they'd just gotten together. And he was saying that he wanted, deeper relationships and stuff like that, and not to be based on sex only. And then they were going to sleep together, and she kept questioning, well, you said that you wanted this. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this, right? And then he sort of had a bit of a moment and got defensive about it because she was testing him around it, when he should have just said, because I want to. Right? So men just go, yeah, I want this because this is what I want. There's no real justification. I'm more of the old school masculinity where it's like men go after what they want. They take what they want from the world, not from a oppressive, this sort of rubbish around patriarchy stuff going out there. You're a very driven guy. You're super successful. You didn't get there by asking permission off everyone to do it. You go after and you go, this is what I'm going for and this is what I want to do. That drive and ambition is very attractive to women. So when we've been told and we've been conditioned by society to think that vulnerability is a strength, when it's like, I have seen so many instances where the man becomes vulnerable and the relationship ends because she's made him into his girlfriend.
Let me ask you this, sorry to interrupt. So this is interesting because I did think, I would say that I started to view vulnerability as a strength. Not that that's how I showed up constantly, but I just thought, okay, if I'm feeling an emotion, let's say I'm sad about something, I can then be honest to someone to say hey, I'm not being tough. I'm sad. As an example, and be honest around how I'm feeling in that situation. So I kind of thought not putting up a mask or a facade that's not true and just basically expressing how I'm feeling, I thought was, I'd say a strength.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people consider that a strength, but when you're doing that with your woman constantly, she's going to lose respect for you. So I look at it, that's more owning it, right? It depends on how you deal with it.
Yep.
So I see vulnerability. If you want true vulnerability, men go, I'm going to handle my shit. I'm going to go take this to my friends. I'm going to take it to a therapist. I'm not going to spill out onto my woman. The women are not meant to hold space for us. When the children are distressed, they run to the mother. Do you think that and I ask this as a sort of for the people listening, do you think your woman wants to hold space for you running to her like a child all the time? She wants to hear, and I've said this so many times, I'll handle it and I've got you. You can rely on me. That's what makes a woman feel safe, not you spilling out. There was this long-term study done that I've seen before. Jordan Peterson talks about it. Multiple therapists talk about it. One of the most popular fairy tales is Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
Why? Because she tames the beast. Women want to change the man they go from the beast into a sort of lower category so she can control him. It's biology. It's known as the number one fantasy of women, for them to change the man. And she will psychologically test the man to do that again and again and again. And the more unshakable you are, the more she'll trust you. It's kind of been inverted where it's, women want us to be more emotionally available so they can understand us. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it doesn't provide psychological safety. If a man's got constant anxiety, constant sadness, crying all the time, she's going to get out of that pretty quickly. And I would be very interested to hear how many women have been in that and found that a turn on with men and made them want to, procreate with them, because it does not happen. Unless she's the really strong alpha type of boss babe, which is a compensation, because that's not natural for a woman to do that either, based on her biology. Because there's biology and instinct and psychology and intellect. And psychology and intellect can be manipulated, but biology and instinct can't. So biology and instinct's very different. And men are the space holders. We're the ones that are supposed to sit there and listen and hold space for the woman so she can unravel. That creates intimacy. That creates attraction. That creates polarity. If it's the other way, it's not going to work long term.
When you say the other way, do you see that frequently where...
All the time.
So it's common?
More common than it isn't. It's more uncommon. I was having this with my partner last night. She was sitting there, she's getting upset, and she's been in relationships where a guy's been like, this is on you to handle. I'm not here to hold space for you. And I was there with her, and I said, you can feel whatever you need to feel. I'm here. And that was it. And she started crying. She unraveled, did what she needed to because she's going through a big process at the moment. And I just held her, and I said, you're safe here to feel whatever you need to feel.
I like that. I heard Simon Sinek on Diary of a CEO, and he was talking about what you're sharing around not vulnerability, but he says what he calls sitting in the mud. He doesn't want his friends to come in there and baby him and try and solve problems for him. He just wants his friends to sit in the mud with him and not even talk, just be there so he can just express himself. And I really resonated with that because, sometimes you got people who are unqualified, who are friends just trying to be nice, but they're trying to like make suggestions to you that aren't really helpful. And I think there's something really beautiful about just, as you were saying, just being there, holding space.
You do that because we're problem solvers, right? I love to fix problems, and I'll know when my woman needs a problem fixed or if she needs to be held. Women want 4 things: to be seen, to be heard, to be held, and to be ravished. They're the 4 things that they want.
What does ravished mean?
Made love to.
Made love to.
Right. So women want to be claimed. Despite what popular narratives are out there, they want that. So the language between masculine and feminine, the woman's like, I'm yours, and the masculine is, you're mine. Right? This is the language that wants to go on with it. And it's very true. And when you start to adopt this kind of biological instinct, you should want to, as a man, like the woman wants to know that you can be a bit dangerous. That's why the bad boy archetype always gets all the women. But they also want to know that you can love and look after their children as well, or your children together. So there's softness that's required towards her, not softness in you. And also a bit of like kind of fuck you energy, which is like, I know how to say no and set a boundary and maintain that. Because the more that a woman allows you to lower your boundaries and change your mind all the time, she won't trust you.
What do you see in terms of progress? So these men come to you and they're being, let's call it, they're being very vulnerable with their partner, and there's problems, right? And then you change the pace in terms of how they show up. Like, do you see a massive change within the dynamic of like the relationship? Like, does the female get a bit put off around, hey, like this dude's just come back and he's showing up differently now? Like, how does that play out?
Most of the time, if I do it, I get the man not to tell her what she's doing. It's done through showing, because a lot of men break promises these days. I've got a couple that I've worked with, been together for 27 years, and it's like they first met again. And they'd gone through it, there'd been affairs and everything else, and they're more in love now than they ever were. They're like, they can't keep their hands off each other. And I just help them to shift that back to the natural state. Because of the psychological testing of a woman, he's become much more resolute and solid in it. And I was like, we're not going to tell her any of this or what's going on. You're going to show her. Because words and actions, I mean, you can't keep all of your words all of the time. It's like there's the book, The 4 Agreements.
Yeah, I love that.
And the first one is be impeccable with your word. And I'm like, the only way you'll ever be impeccable with your word is to realize you'll never be fully impeccable with your word, right? So you do your best, and then you own if you can't after that. You're allowed to change your mind too. So what I get the men to do is start to demonstrate. Like, women love confident men. Confidence is the ability to produce a result again and again and again and be reliable, because what we're supposed to do as men is reduce the amount of choices a woman has to make. Not because we want to control them, but because it makes her life easier when we go, I'll take on all the problems, I'll deal with all the mess, you can relax. And that makes a woman move into a more surrendered state, because women think horizontally, men think vertically. So we can prioritize major problems. You try to talk to me while I'm sending a text message and do 2 things at once, I start to combust. I can't do it. Like, give me a massive problem to focus on, then I'll go problem 2, 3, 4, 5. Women think horizontally. So they'll be needing to do a tax return, feed the kids, take the dog for a walk, evade an arrest warrant, and they won't be able to actively put 1 to 5 down. Not all women, but a lot of women are like that. That's why you'll see when they get overwhelmed in decision making, they'll have a lot of things going on. And this is where, as men, what we're supposed to provide is containment. So a woman will be uncontained and overwhelmed, and we're supposed to help her to contain that with our groundedness. So if we're constantly emotional and she doesn't know what she's getting, and it's like, I'm anxious one day, I'm sad the next, I'm accusing her of something the next, and then I'm withdrawing the next, that's not contained. Like, we're meant to be grounded, solid, stoic, and contained, so we can help her contain her emotions so she can calm down. Reduction of anxiety, so we remove the amount of choices that she doesn't want to make. It's not about telling her she doesn't have a choice. It's about taking on the choices that she doesn't want to handle. That creates space in the woman, and then she starts feeling more and she'll surrender to you.
What's your perspective? Like, what's your view on why so many relationships break down? I know it's a pretty general question, but just from like your observations for people you've worked with and what you see out there, like, why is like such a large percentage collapsing?
Yeah, it's a good question. Enmeshment is one of them. So it becomes like one sort of messy unit where there's a blurred meridian between what's mine and what's yours and what's healthy for the relationship. The Gottman Institute is kind of like the leader in relationships, and they talk about the criticize and defend cycle.
Okay.
the lack of understanding between the man and the woman. So we'll be at home, socks will be left on the floor, and she'll be like, why haven't you picked that up? And we're sitting there worrying about what we're going to do to provide and pay the mortgage and the bigger problems. We don't see the socks on the floor. For the women to go into this, Alison Armstrong's really good. She's a woman that talks about how women should see men and what's going on for men, because it's easy to come from a man's perspective. Women don't particularly like that, but when it comes from a woman's perspective, she makes a lot of good points around it. So when men don't understand women, whenever something's not understood, we try to reduce it to its simplest parts. So men objectify women when they simplify them. Women emasculate men to simplify them. You know, all we want is one thing. That's a pretty common thing. All women are crazy is what men are saying, rather than trying to understand them, because most men can't actually hold space for a woman so she can feel heard and understood and held. Then what happens is over time they become like roommates. Their values aren't clear. They don't have a shared vision for the relationship. And this is where I got into my relationship. I look at shared vision, shared values, shared purpose, shared timing. And you got to have best friends, respect and love, communication, and sexual chemistry. If you get all 8, you've got a good chance of having a solid long-term relationship. So why they break down is people don't know where they're going. The relationship's meant to be led by the man. He needs to know where he's going, what he's doing in the world, who he is, have clarity and have substance, like I said before, and be unshakable. So when you're all of that, you'll know where the relationship is going. Whereas if most men don't know where they're going, they get lazy, they get complacent, she gets bored. You can pretty much make a woman feel anything except bored. When she gets bored, that's like cancer to the relationship, and disrespect is the cancer to the relationship for the man. So she'll start disrespecting him, he gives up, then they just fight all the time, there's no intimacy, and the relationship dies off.
Do you think like just poor communication breaks down a lot of relationships?
100%. Communication's the lifeblood of it, because there can be, you got to look at things like there's a we and then there's a me. In a relationship, you have to put the we ahead of the me. So the sanctity of the relationship needs to be more important, in my opinion, than my individual demands and needs. So when someone can't be with someone's complaint or be understanding, like I was saying with my partner last night, she was going through stuff, and then she actually got a little bit triggered because of my absence of emotion, because I was just so with her and solid. She's not used to that. So she would have more of an unconscious template for like chaotic emotions, whereas I'm just very grounded and stable in that space. So for me, I can actually understand her and listen to her without reacting. So then we have a high level of communication, because she can get to the part where she resolves the emotional issue. She cries, she lets it out, she hugs me, good, we don't have to deal with it again. That's done and dealt with. Most people don't know how to do that. And so they see it as like, if I'm bringing something, it's a criticism, then they're going to defend it. And then that cycle kills 93% of relationships.
What impact do you think like self-sabotage has on individuals, on relationships?
Everything. There's something in our psyche that's like masochistic to destroy. And sabotage is the part of us that likes to destroy something good. Nature does it. It's the cycle of birth, evolution, and destruction. The birth and evolution and destruction cycle is met with sabotage in the human condition. So it's like a friction point. So it's like transcendence into something new or go back to the familiar. And the ego is going to want to keep going back to the familiar all the time.
Why is that?
It's just part of the way that the psyche's been set up, because if we could just transcend things without actually challenging ourselves to go through it, then it's not going to be a very rewarding experience. It's like the hardest lessons in life are the ones that are the most rewarding. If it was just like, if you could just go be a millionaire tomorrow and it's like, okay, cool, someone's just going to put $2 million in my bank, okay, cool, that's fine. But what's it going to be like if you have to dig yourself out of holes to get there, and who you have to become to get there, or becoming excellent at relating, or finding your purpose? If those things were just easy to do, then they wouldn't be worth it. And so the sabotage mechanism is the necessary gateway to transcendence into the new version of you, but it's met with an intense amount of friction that you have to break through to become that. And that's super rewarding.
And for someone listening to this who's maybe like, going through and sabotaging themselves, and like, let's say who's not breaking through, like, how do you get to that point where you actually can see the light and just get through?
We'll do my course, because that's one of the things that I teach in it. But look at which psychological conflict it is. And so if it's criticism, and this was a big one for me, criticism, if you're looking at criticism, the opposite to criticism is praise, right? So you start to move in the opposing direction. So the first thing with criticism is you say, I'm no longer engaging in conflict.
Yeah.
Criticism is just unnecessary conflict. Seek to understand, and then praise and thank the person for bringing that to your awareness. You do those three things, your critical model will start to dissolve and disband. Then another one will probably pop up in like the control, or if it's, being unloved or rejected. People have an addiction to rejection big time. And rejection's more masculine, abandonment is more feminine. And so if you're in the rejection piece, like where are you rejecting yourself? Because no one can ever reject you. You can only ever reject yourself. And then you can only ever reject anyone else because you're not really giving them a chance to love you for who you truly are. And so you could probably sit there and say, well, I just said a few minutes ago, vulnerability is weakness, and that might require an aspect of vulnerability. But the minute you're okay representing that part and showing yourself, which is the minute you're okay being vulnerable, you're no longer vulnerable because you've got nothing to hide. So there is no vulnerability that's there for you. So it's about finding which one is the true one that sits there for you, and then working on that through delivering some sort of opposite mechanism to it.
Do you think everyone, obviously, like most people have experienced trauma throughout their life, right?
Everyone, I think.
Everyone. Some level of trauma.
Yeah, I mean, even being born is traumatic.
Yeah.
It's like you're taken out of the womb, you're in the little bubble of life, and then that's torn open, and it's like you're in this lights, and you're using muscles that you haven't used before, and like it's like in the Matrix. Neo asked Morpheus, he's like, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And he said, "Because you never used them before." And he gets freed. So it's like coming out of the womb. Matrix actually means womb too. So it's like you're coming out of that and being born into it. So that first aspect of life. So everyone's born with trauma. So anyone that says, "Oh, I've got no childhood trauma," I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, I've heard that before. It could be falling over, being picked up late from a soccer game, falling in the bathtub, having milk poured over you by your sister or your brother, whatever it is. They're all forms of trauma. It just depends on how long it goes on for, how severe it is, and what the details are of that.
I think, therapy's got, different levels of interpretations by people, right?
Yeah.
Some people probably think, therapy's like for people who, who really just need some level of help, and maybe I don't fall in that category.
Yeah.
So they've got this perspective. There's obviously people who value it, who receive it. Do you think that most people need to go through a process of working with someone to actually heal trauma that they A might be aware of, or B may have no idea it exists?
I think some people are better with their trauma, to be honest, because that's how they live their life, right? And some people just aren't meant to break free. It can be too big to break free of the known. But to answer your question, yes, you should work with someone because they can reflect and reveal your blind spots. It's very difficult to crack your own blind spots and see your own bullshit, so to speak. I can do it, but I've done this so many times that I can do it on myself because I have a process. But yeah, I think if you want to live a better life, then you should. And I always say that whatever's going on within you, life will draw it out of you like poison from a wound unless you deal with it. And not everyone is meant to deal with it, but they'll deal with it one way or another, whether it's sickness, illness. One of the things I was talking about recently is grief, and asymmetrical grief. And what happens is if we lose someone when we're young and we don't process it, we'll go through a loss later on to process that grief. So I see this in breakups. This is really big in breakups, where someone will have, say, lost a father or a mother when they were 10 or 12 or 15. Then they attract in a relationship that's similar to the person that they lost. That person will leave them, and then that will bring on this asymmetrical grief, as in the form of like it shouldn't affect you that much, to compensate for the loss that they haven't dealt with in the past. So if you haven't dealt with grief, you'll keep attracting in situations to make you deal with the grief. And so it's really important to see that whether it's, I'm more of the belief that all illness is psychologically driven, and that's biased because that's what I work in with my work. Short of being exposed to radiation or, some chemical compound or something like that, I think that most diseases, cancer, all those sorts of things have some sort of psychological component to it, and emotional that you can deal with, or even spiritual that you can deal with in order to heal that process as well. So I think that everyone should try to deal with themselves on some level, because if you look at the state of the world at the moment, there's a bunch of children running around in adult bodies demanding that every feeling be validated and every experience they have is real and true. And if they don't, they throw their toys out of the pram. This is a result of the absence of an individuation process. So when we don't split from the parents and we don't become psychologically mature, we get what's going on in the world at the moment, which is a bunch of victims and a bunch of children in adult bodies running around demanding that everything that they go through is valid.
How do you crack open victims? Like I think I struggle with victims because I feel like I used to be a victim.
We all were.
Yeah.
Because it's an unconscious mechanism.
And I think I hated that about myself so much that when I see people being victims now, like I'm allergic to it.
Yeah,
And
it's repellent.
It's hard, like front row at the victim show. So, like, because I feel like with victims, like it's obviously I'm not skilled, but when you're trying to like help them see, like they just can't, from my experience, they can't see anything.
Yeah.
And they just keep arcing up and arguing with you, and
Yeah.
it just goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, how do you break through with a victim?
So victims love to blame.
Yeah.
Right? That's their main mechanism. And blame is a way to justify their own anger.
Yeah.
And I always just say to them, do you ever wonder in life wherever you've got problems, you're always there? So you can't help but you make them take responsibility. And they hate that statement, but it's true. It's like wherever you go, your problems follow you. You're the common theme. Perhaps you need to look at yourself around that. Because the victim consciousness, there's a payoff for it. Like they might get, if you look at conflict releases dopamine, anger releases dopamine. So it's like this addiction that they get to dopamine through like getting angry, then they get attention, they get validation. But if you look at it from like a deeper construct, a child cries out for attention and that's all they're doing. It's like you see people that get road rage. I used to be terrible at road rage. You think about it, most of the time road rage is just, oh, you didn't consider me. You didn't see me. So I wasn't seen or heard as a child. And then it's usually most of the time nothing happens. It's just you cut someone off.
Yeah.
And if you're in that much of a sensitive state, for that to happen, then you're just replicating some childhood experience where you weren't seen or considered or heard, that something bad might have happened even though nothing actually happened. And then I'm going to get angry about that so I can get your attention. That's all it is. And so victims are just crying out for attention. The problem with it is the more attention you give them, the more they want, right? So it's like, I'm the same as you. Yeah, I just go, man, that's not for me. It's like, you're responsible for your own life. If you want to blame me, cool, bro, but I'm not going to indulge that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Narcissism. Like, do you see that a lot? What's your view on it? I know you mentioned about narcissistic abuse syndrome.
Narcissistic abuse syndrome, yeah. So this term has become like a sort of flavor du jour in the social media landscape. Like for everyone on there, don't listen to social media around it. I'm on social media. I talk about it from time to time. Every ex is now a narcissist, right? And it's a very complex process to diagnose narcissistic personality disorder. It's a rare psychiatric condition. And people that go, yes, I've been in this relationship and this and this and this and this, and they're all narcissists. No, they won't. Because if you do one that's got real narcissistic personality disorder, you will learn very quickly that you'll never do that again. You don't do it twice or 3 times. If you do, you're not learning the lesson, and 100% of people come out with cognitive dissonance. So they're not going to be admitting their ex is a narcissist until they resolve the cognitive dissonance. 60% come out with PTSD. I came out of a relationship with both of those, and it nearly killed me, and it was brutal. I got a pretty solid constitution. I'm pretty resilient. It nearly killed me being in that. It took my health to the limits that I would never, ever do again. One of the components of it is long-term celibacy and narcissistic abuse syndrome because of a fear of intimacy. I actually went into that, and I was celibate for a couple of years after I split from this partner. I thought I was just being masculine and stoic about it, and I wasn't. And I discovered during that time that celibacy is actually a byproduct of narcissistic abuse syndrome. So is PTSD, so is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is where you can only see the good in a person and you refuse to see the bad. This is what people with narcissistic personality disorder do in order to maintain confusion. So what they'll do is they use structures like gaslighting, which is telling someone how they think and feel. It might be like if we're sitting across from each other and then you start going, why are you getting so mad, Jack? I'm like, I'm not mad. And you're like, you need to get that anger under control. And I'm talking like this. And so it's telling me what I'm thinking and feeling, right? That's gaslighting and manipulation. So they use that to create an absence of steadiness through push-pull. And then they'll use an idealized method. So they build you up, then they devalue you, they tear you down, they discard you, they get rid of you, and then they hoover you back in by telling you everything you want to hear. I had this when I discovered this cycle. It's not my genuine discovery. I was reading a book on it, and I'd split up from an ex, and it said in the hoovering aspect in the book, when the narcissist is done abusing you, they'll send you a message like, I'm ready to get married and have a baby. Hand on my heart, within an hour, I got that exact message. And with no intention to deliver it, just to pull it back in. And I've seen it in people that I know, their partners come back and they say all the right things, and I'll give you babies and I'll love you and I'll be whoever you need me to be, all that bullshit. That's hoovering, and that's a massive red flag. People with narcissistic traits are different. Children have narcissistic traits where it's self-centered, demanding, sort of ego-driven, and narcissistic personality disorder is a rare psychiatric condition. People are conflating and confusing the two. Just because a guy didn't call you back, he's not a narcissist. Just because he broke up with you, he's not a narcissist. Just because he might not fucking like you doesn't make him a narcissist. Someone's allowed to not like you. Someone's allowed to have boundaries. Someone's allowed to say, hey, your behavior shit and I don't like it. That doesn't mean they're a narcissist. Someone might be, have strong boundaries. They're not a narcissist. Narcissists don't like people with boundaries. That's another indicator to see if you're with someone that is really trying to manipulate you. And so these tenets are really important to see, because this word it's lost its meaning. And why I'm passionate about it is because it dilutes the experience for people that have got narcissistic abuse syndrome or really suffered at the hands of someone, for people that just don't like the fact that they got rejected. And we're living in a society that is developing stronger trait narcissism through entitlement, lack of accountability, going scorched earth and shaming other people around stuff, lying. Like, you see this all the time. Like, the current state of modern relationships is pretty bad. And most people are self-diagnosing their ex as narcissists without knowing the actual diagnostic criteria. And so I try to bring more light to it from the point of understanding like what it truly is, what narcissistic abuse syndrome is, because anyone can say what narcissism is, but do you actually know what narcissistic abuse syndrome is? Tell me what that is. No one's been able to say, because no one really knows about it, and they don't have those qualities. That's the thing. So going around saying they're gaslighting, they're doing this, one of the biggest things about a narcissist is victim mentality. They never take responsibility. So by virtue of that, they're actually more in the world of being a narcissist themselves by not taking accountability for it. So it's just kind of feeding in and of itself. But I believe, I haven't heard anyone else talk about this, that narcissists are the narcissistic personality disorder is the adaptation that nature has created to begin the individuation process, because the way to heal from narcissistic abuse syndrome, from being in a relationship with a true narcissistic personality disorder human, is individuation. So the narcissist is a complete false self. They're completely trapped in fantasy. That means on some part they pull you into a fantasy, and that'll be based in cognitive dissonance, which they come in to help you destroy. So there is a beneficial aspect to it. I don't agree with what they do. I suffered from it very badly. But it's the start of your individuation process. And where I discovered this was I couldn't figure out why people that don't have a history of it in their family were attracting it in. So my mother is one, and then I brought in one partner to help me dismantle that. So relationships are the new model for the individuation process to become whole. But I couldn't figure out why, people come from a loving family, but they're attracting in a narcissistic relationship. And then I was like, this person's meant to split them from the mother and father so they can go into the world and become whole. It's not for everyone. Not everyone will do it, but it's the mechanism for great change.
You said recently when we were speaking that you did some EMR?
EMDR.
EMDR?
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
Eye movement desensitization response, I think it is.
Yeah.
So it was developed, I think it was the 80s actually it was developed. I can't remember. And it's through eye movement. So in your dreams, you're going to rapid eye movement to process emotions. That's why you dream, and one of the reasons why you dream. And they then started to use this technique on war veterans, and it had an 80% efficacy rate of 100% dissolution of PTSD.
Wow.
And I still do it nowadays for greater insight because I get a lot of insight from it. But I did it really intensely for 6 months to heal from the previous relationship that I'd been in, and it dissolved all of the trauma, and my life changed as a result from it. And I went into childhood experiences, and then I kept going backwards into different experiences, and I was having profound spiritual experiences on it. And I had one where I found the seed of all my suffering, where I was 1.5. My mum was beating the shit out of me in a room, and I shut down and I froze in that moment. And I was shaking in the experience, but also in the memory. And from there, I was stuck in this construct of I'm scared, right? So I'm scared, then developed a defense mechanism of stay away from me. And then this adaptation of fear that came up, which was my greatest fear was attracting in a woman like my mother that I would have a child with, that then she'd take the child off me and I couldn't protect the child from her in the way that I needed to be protected. So all this structure ripped through me like an atom bomb. For like 5 days, I was smashed and I was just putting the pieces back together. But what I realized is I'd actually used that and I developed a different adaptation to become a womanizer and sleeping around and doing all that, thinking I'm fucking awesome doing it and not committing to a woman because this thing had kept me trapped for so long. And EMDR helped me get to that point beyond myself to heal it. And the energy came out of me. I got put back together. Not long after that, I met the woman that I'm with now.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long are these sessions?
Then 75 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're like you'll go through the 10 worst things that have happened. You do the eye movement technique and energy just starts to come out of you. I've got probably 15 or 20 people that I've sent into this stuff and they have profound results on it. It's life-changing. And I think anyone that has, difficult trauma should do it.
If there's not like one specific situation, is it like worth going there?
100%.
Yeah.
You'll find them in your childhood. Like they'll look at the 10 worst things that ever happened to you. Then what'll happen, more things will come up as you go along with it.
When you hear the word identity, like what comes up?
Identity is an interesting one because I just think it's a conglomeration of different parts of you that you've inherited on top of what's inherent. So when you go for what's inherent, that's underneath, that's complete freedom to be you.
Yeah.
Identity is what we've learned through school, parents, what we've taken on, what we've inherited down from our family lineage, from our environment, our teachers, our news, all of that. It's like you kind of saw in the COVID thing, it was a big split between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and the people that really got into the narrative and the people that were against it, and then they identified with either side of it. So that's going to be driven by your identity as to which way you go with it. So I think identity is really just a collection of things that we have inherited from our external environment until we start to go into the internal environment and start to allow our true self to come out.
Dude, I've loved this chat. It's been wild.
Same, man.
I love what you do. So
Thanks, man.
keep crushing.
Likewise.
And yeah, really enjoyed jamming.
Appreciate you, bro.
Thanks.